If you have a side hustle or a business that you're passionate about and you're trying to grow it, but you're very busy and you really don't know how to delegate or you don't know what the resources are to delegate, keep watching. This video is for you. I will help you out. I have hands-on experience in just that. Welcome back to the Chasing a Greater Vision podcast. I'm your host, Rickey Jasper. Today's topic is how to delegate when you're trying to grow a business or trying to grow a side hustle, right? We live in 2024, about to be 2025 in a few months, which is crazy. And most of us have jobs, but we also have something else that we're passionate about that we're doing on the side that actually takes a lot out of us. It takes a lot of time and attention, and we don't necessarily know how to delegate. So we end up working a full-time job and then basically another full-time job trying to do this side hustle that we're passionate about. So how do we do this whole delegation thing and everything? So I'm going to get through the high-level tips for you, and then we will get into all of everything. So number one, identify what tasks can actually be delegated. Number two, gain trust and lower your expectations a little bit. Number three, communicate the vision and the task clearly. And number four, regularly review and listen to adjust, to make adjustments. So why is this like a thing now? It's because, we have things that we're passionate about. We're taking on so much in so many aspects of life. And the other thing too is we realize that if we're doing everything ourselves, it can actually cut costs, because when you delegate, not everybody's working for free. So you have to spend some money, and you also have to spend some time training up other people, other teams on what you need. So what I've done in the past, and I will give a quick resume. So I built an apparel company, 413 Apparel, with a team of about 7 people over time. But when it first started, it was just me in my studio apartment. We ran that for 5 years before I decided to move from San Diego to Texas to build a house, hopefully build a family, all this other stuff, and really just podcasts and work in tech and everything. But I learned so much running an apparel company, all the good, all of the bad as well, because working a full-time job and then running an apparel company that was growing, that really popped and grew really big in 2020, that was a lot. Like the apparel company I felt like I was rarely sleeping because I was just doing everything, and a small team we were working. But I realized over time I had to delegate tasks, because if I wasn't able to delegate, then I can't do the packing and picking, the shipping, the content creation, the posting, the designing, the cutting, the sewing, all of the things that go into making and selling one piece of apparel. It was so much, and especially when you add in the customer service piece, because we got to a point where it's like, okay, now we're having a full supply chain where it's like we have big launches, and then after big launches, we have a lot of people returning, exchanging, all of that, where it just got crazy. But over time, I had learned the art of delegation, and when I first started doing it, I wasn't the best at it, but over time, I became better, because I was like, oh, okay, this is what my team needs from me. Here's how I'm able to lead and delegate. And also, because I knew the business, there were areas where it's like you can cut costs a little bit, or you don't have to just spend so much, right? So number one, identify tasks that can be delegated. I have a rule: if I'm not good at it, I delegate it, especially if I'm not good at something where I want it to be successful. Prime example, this podcast. If you followed my channel for years, you would know that I never had a podcast producer. It was always just me. I would set up my camera, and then I would do my own editing, or I would delegate and outsource some of the editing, but I would just set up my own camera, and the production quality wasn't that great, and I would just be like, the product was fine. And to start, when you're starting something, that's great. But as you improve, you want to be able to delegate a little bit bigger and bigger. So what I did was, before I moved to Texas, I put out a Craigslist ad, and I was like, I need a content creator, a podcast producer in Texas. Mason, who's behind camera right now, looking at me through the camera, was like, hey, here's what I do, so on and so forth. I'm big on storytelling, boom, boom, boom. We met in Texas before we even moved here, at a Starbucks right across the street from me, and we were talking, and I was like, hey, you're my guy for the long haul. This is what I want to do. This is what I'm passionate about. Boom. And so we've been doing it ever since for about 18 months or so. But basically, I realized I'm not good at this whole lighting setup, this camera thing, the editing, the consistency with the posting, the consistency with the clips. I'm not good at that. So I'm like, I need somebody to do that. What I know that I'm good at is when the camera's on, when I see that red light, I'm like, I'm on. Just put me in a place where the camera's on, I'm good to go. But I don't want to be the one that's in charge of bringing the camera and the lights and doing things, because by the time I get to do my core competency, what I'm really good at, I'm tired and I'm frustrated and I don't want to do it. And when I do it, it's not to the best of the ability, because what you all didn't see in the previous podcast was the frustration I had. Literally, there were times where I was like, I filmed a whole podcast and I realized I didn't hit record, or I filmed a whole podcast or I wasn't in focus. And so the amount of time that I spent just consistently doing the same thing and not getting the results, by the time I got on camera and by the time I was recording and everything, the message didn't come through like I wanted to, because I was a little bit frustrated, right? And so identifying the task that can be delegated is very important. Number 2, gain trust and lower expectations. Now, this is a very important one, because everybody has their own vision in their mind, and whoever you are delegating to might not see that vision, or it's not because of any negligence. It's just they're not you. And whatever you have that's your dream, that's like your baby. You're the one person who is going to love and treat your baby with the most care and respect and everything. And other people, they have their babies. Like Mason, his baby is content creation and everything. Mine is getting in front of camera and talking. And so it's like, hey, I know that although we work as a team, we have to also talk about expectations that we have with each other. I'm just like, hey, this is how I like these things to look or whatever. And then he's sitting back and he's reviewing, the podcast, and he's like, hey, how about we do these segments here? How about we have these hooks here? And so on and so forth. So there's 2 things that we're both really good at, that they're both our baby, that we have to communicate so that we can have proper expectations, right? And when I say lower expectations, it's because there's a process with everything. Not everything's going to be perfect when you start. When we first started this podcast, we had a few different segments, right? And segments where I was like, oh, they sound good. Sounds great. But then if I look and I watch my old podcasts, for me, they're unwatchable, because I'm like, they just kind of lack a little bit. They lack the realness, the personality, the what I'm actually feeling, the depth. What they do really well on is, hey, high level structure, but I'm not speaking in textbook form. That's not who I am. Like if you catch me and we're talking, like I'm not speaking like that. I'm more so speaking like this. So we had to get to this level, right? And we'll just continue to evolve. But managing expectations with your team and with who you're delegating tasks is going to limit a lot of frustration, because what it's saying is, I'm giving us some time to grow, to figure this thing out, to see what works, what doesn't work, because what works in 2024 might not work in 2025. If you look at a social landscape, and if you look at an industry landscape, and you look at what was getting attention on social, on YouTube 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 2 months ago, is different than what it is now, and how things are being configured, it's different than what it is now. So you always want to be able to evolve and adapt. And that is how that's going to be very important when you gain trust with who you're delegating tasks to, and also lowering expectations, just giving allowance to learn and grow. Number 3, communicate the vision and task very clearly. On a tech field, in my technical field, I'm a lead business analyst, right? So what that means, for a very just short explanation, is I understand what the client wants and I translate it so that there's a dev team that can develop what the client wants and needs. Now, when I do that, I have to be very, very clear in my communication, because I am the bridge. It's basically a game of telephone, and I am in the middle, and I have to translate. I'm right here. I have to translate what's going over here to over here. Now, if I miscommunicate and a developer builds something based on what I communicated, it could eventually be wrong. And I can't sit back and be upset at it, because I didn't clearly communicate what I was told. I didn't clearly communicate what the expectation was or what the vision was. A few questions that you want to make sure that you are communicating to whoever you're delegating the task to is what the outcome is going to look like, or what you want the outcome to look like. Also, why does it matter, right? There's one thing where, when Mason and I were talking about this podcast, and as we've gotten deep, what you've heard me talk about a little bit more now is like my career, my tech career, also, my marriage a little bit more, and fitness a little bit more, and really kind of getting more granular with things, because I don't necessarily want to be super broad, because what I want to do is meet people where I'm at, and also communicate with people that I know that I can communicate with, because I know that that's where I can provide the most value. So the question was like, Ricky, why does your message matter? Right? And so if we couldn't answer that, it's just like, well, we can just sit on camera and just talk about stuff, and it's not really going to matter. But it's like, hey, we want it to matter for a specific demographic, for a specific audience. And the other thing too is, when you're delegating tasks and when you're delegating things, like, you also have to be able to clearly communicate why it's going to benefit the person that you're delegating the task to. I think that's one that's missed a lot, is because even when it comes to startup companies, or when it comes to when you're doing something new and different, you can get people on board, and that's great. But over time, people are going to sit back, and they've been riding with you for a while, and they're going to sit back and they're going to say, okay, this is great. Now, we built to a certain whatever, but like, how is this has benefited me a little bit, but like, how is this really going to continue to benefit me, and how are things going to evolve and shift and change? And that sometimes can be hard conversations, but it's important to talk about those things, because you don't want people just aptly just doing things, and then over time it's just like it gets boring, gets stale. Nobody knows how it's benefiting, and they're just going through the motions. And I think that's how people fall off. People are scared to talk about how things are, how things can consistently benefit the other person, and make adjustments, right? So make sure that you're communicating the vision, that you're communicating it very, very clearly, and then answering and asking specific questions so that you can answer them to other people that you're delegating. Number 4, regularly review and listen to adjust. So feedback goes both ways, right? You have to be in an area where, when I delegate this to Mason, to all content and podcast stuff, and I'm now doing the vlogs with my guy Scott, those are 2 people who I trust in content creation with my life. I am very much like, yo, this is what I want to do. You guys are the creative. The amount of times I've sat back now, especially, and just been like, hey, I felt good about this. What did you see? What can I improve on? And everything. Because I am listening for things that I don't see. They're content creators. I love to talk, right? But they can sit back from a content standpoint and say, hey, I understand what you're getting, but it could be stronger if this in XYZ happened, or if you did 1, 2, 3, right? And so we have to be able to communicate both ways. And what that and how you do that is you keep it open. You keep your lines open for communication. When you are growing a business, when you're trying to do something new, it's not a dictatorship, because you're then pulling other people in who have opinions, who have lives, who have things that are important to them. And as much as, business, it would be great if it was just robotic and everybody could turn their feelings off and just do their job and blah, blah, blah. That's not life, right? So you have to have a two-way street of communication. My brother probably took the brunt end of this when I was running 413. And it was probably because I was like, hey, I want you to do this. And he was on board to do anything, but I wasn't understanding that I was delegating probably a wrong thing to him, because he wasn't passionate about it. But I was like, I just kind of need hands on board, right? And so that was the content posting, the scheduling, and everything. It's not something where he loves to do, but he was like down for doing it. Now, there were times where posts were missed and so on and so forth. And I would just get so frustrated and everything. And there would be like no conversation about, like a two-way conversation to be like, I need you to do this by this time. And at that time, we had a pretty tense relationship, because it was like, okay, 1, I'm doing business with my brother, but then 2, I'm like, hey, like, I'm trying to run this thing and, fund this thing and everything. So I felt a lot of insecurity around it too, financial insecurity and pressure and stuff too. But what I realized was that over time, what happened was, then I was like, hey, how can we make this better? Then I started listening. Then I started understanding his viewpoint. Then I started understanding, hey, he didn't think that this was the best way to go about like how we're doing content. He had so many great ideas. And I was like, whoa, wait a second. So then we started coming to the table, and then we just flipped how we did content on a head, the way that we shot, the way that we promoted, the way that we did everything. And I was like, oh, I realized that's the value of listening to somebody, because also who you're delegating tasks to, they might be scared to speak up because you're someone who may be paying out of pocket for them, right? And so they're like, well, however you want to do it, I don't feel the need to rock the boat. That's why making sure that you have those regular reviews and having the conversations, doesn't matter how expensive, inexpensive the resource is. Listen, have a conversation, understand people's lives. So to run this down really quick, number one, identify tasks that can be delegated. Not everything can be. Some things you just got to do, but other things, if you're not good at it, delegate it. Number two, gain trust and lower expectations. Not everybody is going to do everything to your standard at the first, second, or third time. Sometimes it might take time. Number three, communicate the vision and the task very clearly. If you're not communicating it clearly and it doesn't come across how you wanted it to, can't be mad. You just didn't communicate it well. Number four, review regularly review and listen to adjust how you do things. People are people. We want to be heard. We want to be listened to. We want our opinions to be valued. Make sure that you're listening so that you can get the best input for the best output. Now, I hope that you enjoyed this message. If you do, please like, comment, share, and we will see you in the next episode. Peace. For free resources, paid resources, and one-on-one coaching with me directly for fitness coaching and performance coaching using my life coding system, go to RickeyJasperII.com, and I will see you there, and we'll talk directly, and we'll make it happen.